Hello, everyone. How are you? Welcome to our Silicon Dragon show. Really appreciate you being here. And hello to Brad Smith, who I see online. And so today we're going to be talking about a tech titan from Silicon Valley who is originally from West Virginia. And this is a bit of a departure from our regular shows in that, first of all, it's not our regular Ask a VC show. It's an Ask a Tech Titan show. And we're actually detouring a bit from our usual Silicon Valley corridor into Appalachia. Now, why are we doing that? Well, for one reason, we've got a great guest here with Brad Smith, who's originally from West Virginia. And I have to say that I have also been through West Virginia recently and got to see some of the sites there and am impressed by what I'm seeing in the startup scene there. So I would like to invite Brad to join us here and I also wanted to introduce Brad. So as I mentioned, Brad grew up in West Virginia, Canova, which I visited as well on my recent road trip. And today he resides in Menlo Park. He's the executive chairman of Intuit. So we're really into it for today's show. He's a co-founder of the Wing to Wing Foundation, a board director at Nordstrom and SurveyMonkey. 18 years at Intuit, 11 as CEO, where he drove revenues and customers and the stock price sky high. He moved Intuit into mobile apps and cloud computing. So that was a really smart move. It definitely paid off. Before that, he was in marketing and business development roles in a couple of other companies, Advo, even Pepsi Bottling and 7-Up. And he's a graduate of Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia, MA from Aquinas College in leadership development. And Brad, I also wrote in your 5 leadership principles here. So I thought that was really interesting. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about those first, just to get us started here. The 5 Ps.
Well, first of all, Rebecca, thank you so much for inviting me. And I want to say hello to everyone who is dialing in from all around the globe. I am super excited to spend time with you over the next hour or so. And I love this program. I love your books. And I am looking forward to spending time with you, Rebecca. First of all, you were way too kind in your introduction, but it did show my age. But with that being said, I am delighted to share that those principles, those leadership principles, are lessons learned from my scar tissue over 35 years, as well as some best practices that I've borrowed from others and had the ability to implement and test. And I basically boiled down leadership into a definition. And that definition varies depending upon who you talk to. But for me, I believe leadership is the ability to inspire others to achieve shared objectives. And every single word has been choicefully selected. Inspire is about not only winning the mind, but winning the heart. Because we know if people are passionate about their work, they do amazing things for the customers. Others is clearly saying that a leader's orientation is not about themselves. It is in service to others. It's a servant leadership mindset. And then the ability means that it is not a born trait, it's a learned trait. I am not a believer of the trait theory. I think everyone can be a leader and everyone is a leader regardless of their title. And then to achieve shared objectives are clearly thinking about the greater good and not just the things that may accumulate to your particular area or your particular team. And as I laid that out, I began to think about what are the things that over 35 years I have seen work in multiple industries, as you saw. I've lived in 10 states since I left West Virginia. My line out to Silicon Valley was not linear. I went through multiple industries and led through lots of ups and downs and recessions and dot-com boom and bust, platform shifts, competitive rivalry, you name it. And what I've seen as being durable are the 5 Ps. The first is the importance of thinking about potential. I believe a manager coaches performance, a leader inspires and creates potential. The second is being clear about a purpose, and a purpose is a mission or a shared goal that can get everybody's hearts beating faster and have them look out the windshield instead of down at the dashboard. The third P is people. And I love a quote that I heard before, which is, it doesn't matter if you're in packaged goods, you're in services, you're in retail, we're all in the people business. And a player that makes a team great is worth much more than a great player. And then once you have people, you need a playbook. And you don't need to look any further than sports. You can see these franchises that continue to win time and time again. Or if you look in the tech sector at Amazon, they have an ability to continue to serially disrupt. And that's because they have a methodology or a playbook, and everyone in the organization is taught it, and everyone is expected to apply it on a daily basis. And then last but not least is pay it forward. And pay it forward is the obligation of taking what you found and leaving it better than you found it, whether it's your company, your community, or the world in general. So those are the 5 Ps. I'm a big believer that those are the aspects that have helped me do things with a great group of people. And I believe they apply to others as well.
Okay, that's wonderful. I like the way that you've crystallized that with the 5 Ps. And then you forgot one, the 6th one, maybe philanthropy.
Yes, well, for me, philanthropy falls into pay it forward.
Oh, I see. Okay.
One of the avenues that we use is our Wing to Wing Foundation, which I suspect you and I may talk about later, but that is a way for us to pay it forward as well.
Yes, okay, definitely. Yes. Well, folks, if you're listening in, which I can see that several people are, we are going to get to your questions in a little bit, but let me just move the slide forward a second so we can learn a little bit more about Brad and what he's been up to. Oh, also, Brad, since we like to make this somewhat personal and fun, I put in your interest as well, a vegetarian. You're a vegetarian. You're kind of a fitness nut.
Yes.
Getting up, what, 5:30 every morning to exercise?
Yes.
And play the guitar and saxophone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I tease that I might be a little bit of a Renaissance man. I'm a vegan. I went complete plant-based a couple of years ago. There's a whole bunch of reasons why, but I have never felt better in my life, and I've always been an athlete, and I'm actually stronger and have more endurance than I ever had. So there's a lot of science behind why it works for me, and so I'm a vegan. I am a fitness nut. I played lots of sports growing up. I was a martial artist, had a chance to get my black belt in Taekwondo. I have always loved extreme sports. I do P90X 7 days a week. That's a CrossFit program, 5:30 in the morning in my home gym. I love music, guitar and sax, and I write poetry. So I'm a little bit of a mishmash.
Oh, wow. You really are a Renaissance man. Okay.
Now I'm a desperate man trying to find something that may make me a little more likable.
Oh, no, I think you're also already hit the 5 stars on likable, likability. So, all right. So as you're warming up your questions, I just thought I would prompt a few questions myself, and also just to prove that I've been in Huntington recently. This is a photo of me looking, well, I actually look pretty stern there, but I was happier than what looks like in the photo there. But that's in Huntington. And then here is at the new Brad Smith incubator in downtown Huntington. That's part of Marshall University. So I visited that and met with the president of Marshall University, the dean of the business school, and also the lady who's running it, Tricia Bull. So that's a photo of us right here. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Thank you for visiting my hometown. Thank you for visiting those wonderful places and for calling out Tricia and President Gilbert and others. They're just an amazing group of leaders doing incredible things at Marshall.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. Well, let me just ask you about your success strategies and how you got where you are today and lessons learned. And you talked about before that you've lived in a lot of states and you've had a lot of, experiences as a business executive. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about just your background. How did West Virginia actually shape your success?
Well, it's completely responsible for anything and everything I've ever been able to achieve.
Okay.
If you've heard the song from Miranda Lambert, it's the house that built me. And there were formative moments throughout my life. I grew up in that small town of Canova that you mentioned, population 3,000 if you round up. I had two beautiful and loving parents. My mother's still with us. My father passed in 1996. I had two wonderful brothers. I've had friends that have lasted a lifetime. And in the early years, there were three formative moments that shaped who I am. The first was at the age of 6, Rebecca. I was sitting and watching the television in a November evening with my brothers, and scrolling across the screen was a news flash that said that a plane had crashed at the Huntington Tri-State Airport, which is just about 1.5 miles from where I grew up, right in my little hometown.
Yeah.
And I ran and looked out the window, and the sky was glowing red, and we could hear the sirens, and my cousins were volunteer firemen. And so ultimately what ended up happening was that was the Marshall University plane crash that killed the football team and many of our most renowned citizens. 75 souls were lost. And of course, it just devastated a community and devastated an entire program. And you've seen the movie, perhaps, We Are Marshall with Matthew McConaughey. But at that moment actually taught me an important lesson, that life is a team sport. Or to quote Eleanor Roosevelt and many others who are attributed to this, we're all born angels with one wing, and the way we fly is beholden unto one another. And so I came out of that early stage of my life recognizing that this thing is about community and about working together to try to achieve things. You fast forward to the 4th grade, and I had a crush on a little redheaded girl, and I was trying really hard for her to let me be her boyfriend, and we had a spelling bee in class, and she beat me. And the next day she passed me a note. This was before social media, and she wrote on the note, "You can't be my boyfriend because you're stupid." Now, she was pretty insightful because I was not the best student, but that evening I went home and my IQ didn't go up, but my work ethic did. And I'm a big believer that it is not about the grade point average, it's about the effort you put into it. I think that intelligence is applied effort, and every day since I have studied for the midterm the 2nd day of the semester. My third and final formative moment was in the 9th grade, and this was when I had a really good friend that I'd grown up with since kindergarten. I didn't realize my friend was going through some tough times at home. And as a result, he had taken up boxing, but instead of practicing on the equipment, he began to practice on his friends, including me, and became a bit of a bully. And I stood up to him one day and I lost. And I went home to see my mom and dad and my brothers, and I thought they would be embarrassed. But my dad sat me down and said, "Son, I've never been more proud of you because you stood up to something that you were afraid of. And courage isn't the absence of fear. It's a willingness to face the things that scare you the most." And then he enrolled me in martial arts. And by the time I was a senior, I had a black belt in Taekwondo. And what I took from that moment is to stand up to the things that scare you, because they usually aren't as bad as you think, even if you don't succeed on the first round. But secondly, I know what it feels like to be in a victim sort of situation. And so I've become a champion for the overlooked and the underserved. So if you had to put a bow around how West Virginia shaped me, it taught me that life's a team sport and we're all angels with one wing and we can fly by holding on to one another. It taught me that intelligence is simply applied effort, and if you work hard, good things will happen. It taught me to lean into the things that scare me the most, and most importantly, to be a champion for the overlooked and underserved. And that is West Virginia embodied in everything I try to do every day.
Well, that's amazing. So did you ever think that you would be in this position to be able to give back so much to your home state and to your alma mater?
No, Rebecca, I didn't. First of all, no one can ever imagine they're going to have an opportunity to run a company as iconic as Intuit and to be CEO and to do so over a period of time and to work with great people like I have and to be able to learn from the best, the very best in the Silicon Valley. And so that in and of itself has been surreal. And I still pinch myself when I have the opportunity to work alongside these individuals. But then to have that lead to success to an extent where I have an ability to then look and try to find other ways to pay it forward. And for me, it's a real privilege. In fact, I say to everyone in West Virginia that anything and everything I've ever been able to achieve is because of you. And in fact, at Marshall, we say we are Marshall, but I always begin with I am because we are. I would not be here if they hadn't invested in me. So that is such a big part of my life. And it's a joy for me to have an opportunity to pay it forward.
And I see your class ring there, your Marshall University.
Yes, and Rebecca, if you don't mind, I'm a bit of a storyteller. Could I share a story about that?
Yeah.
I mentioned my mother and father. I couldn't have ever dreamed of better parents. My mother is a guardian. She took care of me and my two brothers. She invested so much in us and sacrificed so much to do so. And my father did the same. My father had to travel Monday through Friday, 26 years in a row out of town. And then he would come back on Saturday and Sunday. And neither my mother or father had the opportunity to go to college. So we're first in the generation in our family to go. But they always had a goal that all of their children would get a college degree. Well, fast forward 20 some years, and my youngest brother graduated with his degree from Marshall. My older brother got his degree from Marshall, and as did I. And in 1996, on Christmas morning, my dad had taken the time to buy Christmas gifts himself. And this was something he never did because he was always traveling. My mom usually bought the gifts, and my dad would say, "This is from us."
Yeah.
And ultimately, they were all individually wrapped, and each one of us got a class ring with our year. And 2 days later, as my father was driving me to the airport, he passed away of a heart attack on the way home. So my brothers and I wear these rings for two reasons: because our mommy and daddy kept a promise, and to remind us to pay it forward. So I never take this ring off. I haven't taken it off for any photo shoots or anything else because it reminds me of how I got here and what I have to do to help others. And I'm sorry I got a little bit
No, that's okay. Are you homesick? I feel a little homesick. Are you homesick?
I'm homesick every day, but all behind me, you see Marco, you see Marshall. I have West Virginia University in front of me. I've got my Marshall water jug here. And also, when you and I toast,
Yes.
I have a Greenbrier glass here from Virtu at the Greenbrier Art Colony. It's my favorite art gallery, and this is an amazing glass, so I'm ready to toast with you.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Yes, good. You don't even need the reminder about the toast. That's great.
Not at all.
So look, what was it like coming to Silicon Valley? Was that like a huge shift for you? Because I remember, look, I graduated from Ohio University, which is actually not that far from Marshall University. So we're actually from the same neck of the woods, as they say. But for me, it was a huge shock going to New York City and competing against all these different people. And, it was really very challenging. I really didn't think I would make it past the first year, but I ended up staying something like 15 years or maybe longer than that before I came out to Silicon Valley. But was it kind of shocking for you coming from, a rural town, a rural setting in West Virginia, coming to Silicon Valley here in Techland?
Yes, and I think it's a shock anytime you leave a small community and you move anywhere. And having lived in 10 states, every place I went, I had to learn and adjust and, quite frankly, embrace things that I wasn't used to. And when I came out to Silicon Valley, it was certainly no different. But what was still surreal to this day is to see the people that you read about in Fortune magazine and the Wall Street Journal, and to see the names on the buildings, and to be in group meetings where you're with these individuals.
Yeah.
And it's just humbling to be around people that are changing the world, and they're committed to changing the world. And one of the things I share when I talk to other parts of the world, and they say, "Well, what is it about the Silicon Valley?" And I say, in many places, they try to convince themselves why. But in the Silicon Valley, the first question is, why not? There's just all this dreaming of the art of the possible and willing to take risks, and recognizing that success and failure are equally the same. That's simply an opportunity to learn. So there's this no fear of failure that I think creates this sort of gestalt at the Silicon Valley that becomes very contagious.
Okay. Well, do you think that you can develop a Silicon Valley entrepreneurial culture, or help to develop one in Huntington, West Virginia? I mean, what's it going to take to actually make that transition?
Well, I start with the fact that it's no individual, it's a collection of a lot of people, going all the way back to those lessons that I learned when I was a kid in West Virginia. And that's what the Silicon Valley is. It's not one architect or person. It's been developed over many years, and it's an ecosystem that reinforces itself. It attracts great talent. Great talent comes from great universities and great education systems. They produce great ideas. Venture capitalists like to invest in great ideas. You've got this wonderful set of geography where people get access to mountains and water and snow, and it has this self-reinforcing flywheel effect. And the answer is those same ideas, that same talent, those wonderful universities, those beautiful mountains, those rivers, those streams, those snowshoe and Canaan Valley, they all exist in West Virginia. In fact, they actually exist in many cases on a superior level. We have whitewater rapids, we have hiking and biking trails, and many of those are not even matched anywhere in the US. Now what we have is a university system that's leaning into the entrepreneurial aspect of education that goes from K through 12 up through the colleges, VOTEC, and the universities. We have individuals like John Chambers, Ray Lane, myself, many others leaning in to say, how do we bring the Silicon Valley techniques back to West Virginia, teach them in our schools, have competitions, bring venture capitalists in, shine the light on this amazing talent, and get this flywheel going. And we are really starting to see that take effect. And we've had some pretty exciting successes recently. And I think this is just the first chapter.
Well, I think it's great that you're bringing in judges from Silicon Valley who can actually hear these pitches from the students there and see whether they're viable, and maybe actually get some funding in there as well for these new startups, these new tech startups.
You know, Rebecca, it's been amazing. We had a Shark Tank-like event in 2016, and we held it at the Marshall University campus. We invited high school students, students from other colleges and universities, as well as Marshall. And we had judges, and in that particular case, we took out some innovation catalysts. These are our experts inside of Intuit who are taught the innovation techniques, the lean startup techniques of the Valley. And they were a part of the judging panel, but also invited Jennifer Garner home, the famous actress who is from West Virginia, and Chad Pennington, who played at Marshall as a winning quarterback and went on into the NFL and played for the New York Jets and the Miami Dolphins. And we collectively helped go through a judging process, and we selected winners that blew us away. And by the way, we didn't give them small challenges. They didn't get to just develop anything. We said, we want you to focus on three things: pre-K literacy in the rural parts of the state, opioid addiction and how to break the vicious cycle, or how can we actually move the state from number 48, 49, and 50 to number 1, 2, or 3 in a couple of key areas. These individuals had to apply the Silicon Valley techniques and come back in with working prototypes of how they would tackle any one of those three problems. We were blown away. Once we narrowed down to the winners, we flew them to the Silicon Valley, and I hosted them at the Intuit campus to meet our founder. And we took them to Google and Facebook. And the number one piece of feedback from all of those visits were, Brad, where do we find more of these individuals? Where did these young men and women come from? And that is why we're continuing to cultivate the startup state mentality that all of us are working on in West Virginia.
Right, right. You know, and I noticed too in the news just recently that West Virginia was #1 in the nation in getting the vaccinations out.
Yes.
So that's kudos to West Virginia.
Well, you know, necessity is the mother of invention, and the article suggested that 49 out of 50 states went with this program where they could take advantage of these national pharmaceutical chains to help with distribution. But West Virginia, unfortunately, fortunately in this case, because we're so rural and so mountainous, we didn't have enough of those particular chains in our state. So the governor and the group there defaulted to going with the local pharmacies, the family-owned pharmacies. And fast forward, they work together because life's a team sport. They know how to work through adversity, and there's the state. So I love that. We know how to be scrappy. That's the DNA of an entrepreneur.
Absolutely, that sheer grit. I get it.
Yeah.
That's what I saw in China, actually. And one of the reasons I wrote about China because of the incredible entrepreneurial culture there. And I see some of the same trends in Appalachia today, which is interesting to me. But I wanted to ask you also about design thinking. Can you talk about what design thinking is exactly, and how that is being incorporated into what you're doing now?
I can. Design thinking has been codified and taught at the Stanford Design School. It's also a technique that IDEO and others have taught for years to help really innovative companies move quickly. But it's got two aspects to it, and then I'll describe what the 3 steps are that we teach to make it easy to remember, but also easy to apply as a playbook, going back to my leadership model that we started this conversation with.
Right.
The first is learn by doing. Less talk, more do.
Okay.
And the second is to eliminate this false notion that you can actually research your way to a great business. Instead, you have to iterate your way to a great business. To quote a recent podcast I heard, you have to pass through imperfection to get to perfection. So what design thinking is we teach it in a formula we call Design for Delight. It's something that Intuit uses. We train all 11,000 employees, whether you're in finance, HR, engineering, product design, or any other part of the company. And we have over 1,800 experiments going on every single day across the company. And it has 3 steps. The first is deep customer empathy. And it's not research, it is direct observation. It's analyzing the data. It's getting underneath the why, and then framing a problem statement with an ideal state of what you would like that to look like if you could solve that problem. That's step 1. The second step is go broad to go narrow. And this was developed by the Toyota production system. And one day our founder was in Japan and was actually taking a tour of a Toyota manufacturing facility and noticed the engineers had stopped the machinery and they had looked down at a piece of paper, and in the middle of the paper was a square, and then there were 7 blocks. And our founder, his name is Scott, turned to the manufacturing plant manager and said, "What are they doing?" And he said, "They're trying to solve a problem." Scott said, "What are these 7 blocks?" And he said, "They're not allowed to come up with one idea because that is not creative. They have to come up with at least 7 very different ways of solving the problem. And then what's going to happen is they're going to come together as a group and they're going to lay all those ideas on, and that's going to become 40 or 50 ideas. And that's going to create new ideas. And ultimately, that's when real breakthrough innovation happens." So we have a go broad to go narrow, where once you have a clear problem statement, you have to come up with at least 7 different ways to try to solve it, because that eliminates this group think. And then last but not least is rapid experiments with real customers. And so we have the teams develop a hypothesis with a metric that can be measured. They have to come up with a scrappy experiment that they can get into the market in 48 hours or less, even if it's just a paper prototype. And then they have to come back with real data to say, does your metric hold up or not? And we do that constantly with everything we do, whether it's new hire orientation, or it's how we're going to approach contracts for our sales team, or how we're going to build the next version of TurboTax. And everyone in the company has this owner's mindset, and everyone can see their fingerprints on everything we do. That's design thinking, and that's now what Marshall, West Virginia University, and our grades 10 through 12 are starting to build into their education system in West Virginia.
Right, it's amazing. And also, I'm hearing about more vocational education for students in West Virginia, because maybe not everybody needs to go to college. Maybe we need tradesmen. Maybe we need people who can do tool and die or whatever. Can you talk a little bit about this new idea of more vocational education?
Oh yeah, I'm very, very passionate about this, as you are and so many others, and we should be. I fear, as much as I love education, and it's a reason why I and my brothers have been able to continue to honor our mother and father, and we're trying to pay it forward with education. Education is not just college education, it comes in all forms. If you look at Germany, one of the most productive nations per capita, the majority of their workforce comes out of a VOTEC curriculum. And they are engineering wizards, and they are effective, and they are efficient, and we all know that about Germany. And we can see the quality of those products in Mercedes and BMWs, and you can complete the list.
Yeah.
If you listen to the tech titans like Tim Cook and others, he'll say that our challenge with manufacturing more of our products in the US is we don't have enough skilled tool and die makers. In fact, you could take the entire nation's skilled tool and die makers and put them in a basketball gymnasium. If you go to China, it would take hundreds of football fields. And then you can look at states like Massachusetts, where an entire generation of electricians are retiring, and there's no one to replace them. And it goes on and on and on. Right now, one of the hottest jobs that Amazon and others are trying to hire for are truck drivers with CDL licenses to try to actually deliver the goods. And so we have to infuse back into our culture this real respect and this willingness to invest in VOTEC, but in the next generation of VOTEC. Instead of auto mechanic class that used to tune a carburetor, now focus on how to do that with these new engines, and including the electric cars. And think about robotics and automation, and really infuse those kind of skills back into our education system. And we're trying to do that with simulated workplace. I shouldn't say we, the credit goes to Kathy D'Antoni. She is an amazing inspiration in our state. She was the associate superintendent. She serves on the board of governors of Marshall, and she and a team developed simulated workplace. We took our CTE, our VOTEC programs in our high schools. and have turned them into entrepreneurial classes where students are CEOs, CFOs, and they actually start businesses. And some of those businesses have gone on to get funded. And it's just an amazing experience for these young men and women. It's been so successful. It's now being spread to 130 schools, 24,000 students in the state, and 25 other states in the US have gone to West Virginia to study it and try to bring it to their states.
Oh, wow. Has California been there studying this? Because the usual avenue is that everybody comes to Silicon Valley to figure out what our secrets are here, but maybe West Virginia has a few secrets.
Well, at this point, California, we're working on getting them out there to learn, but we'll see. Sometimes
Okay.
you can learn from places other than California.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, one of your credits at Intuit is actually bringing Intuit into mobile apps and cloud computing. I mean, could you talk a little bit about how you were able to do that, how you were able to foresee these trends and kind of get ahead of it?
Wow. I'll start with everyone's fingerprints were all over those decisions. And there's
Yeah.
two parts that I'll describe. And I'll think about mobile as an example.
Okay.
So 2007, obviously, the smartphone revolutionized mobile. Of course, there were Blackberries and there were flip phones and everything before that. But when Steve Jobs and the team came out with the smartphone, that was the catalyst for this chapter of real mobile platforms with third-party developers building billions of apps. And we were sitting there, we had made it from desktop to the cloud as a company, and we've lived through DOS to Windows and Windows to the SaaS model. And so we knew, okay, here's a new platform. And two things were very apparent as we were approaching that. The first was I had done a listening tour. As I became CEO in January 2008, I had been announced 6 months earlier in 2007, and that gave me a period of months to be able to go talk to key stakeholders. I talked to our employees, I talked to our board members, I talked to fellow CEOs in the Silicon Valley, and I asked them all the same three questions. What are the greatest untapped opportunities you see before Intuit that you think we need to embrace? The second question, what is the greatest risk or concern looming on the horizon that you worry if we do not act now, we will be out of business? And the third question is, what's the biggest thing I could do to screw this up? And what was amazing was no matter who I asked, frontline engineers, CEOs of Google and other places, or our board members, the answers came back the same. You have to embrace SaaS and mobile. You have to begin to think as a platform, and you have to think about being a global company. The second thing is you cannot set your clock based upon your engineer's release cycle. You've got to set your clock based upon customer demand, and you're going to have to increase your velocity. And the third thing is thinking you can do it all yourself. That's how you can screw it up. Mm. So what happened was I had an all hands and I said, okay, our company strategy with all of your fingerprints on it is we're going to move from a desktop company to a cloud-based company, and we're going to embrace social, mobile, and global. Social being code for platform, mobile being mobile devices, and global being global expansion. And one of the engineers in TurboTax, who had been on my team when I ran that business for a while, had no worries about asking me the tough question and said, and I'm going to kind of make this more PG-13 friendly, said, what the heck does a mobile phone have to do with doing taxes? And I said, I have no idea, but I know that mobile is real. And if anyone can figure it out, I know that you and our team can. 6 months later, Rebecca, they figured out long before it was popular how to take pictures of your tax documents, use your mobile phone, use optical character recognition to pull the data, pre-fill the tax return, and get it done in 30 minutes. And that compared to a 2-hour tax return from normal TurboTax. Fast forward, the company is leading in every mobile category that we're in, and it is now the majority of how our customers do their work. And all I had to do was put the grand challenge out there, just like John F. Kennedy did. Let's get somebody to the moon and back. In this case, I said, we need to figure out mobile, and the team did it.
Wow, that's great. What about global? You mentioned global as one of the priorities. I know Intuit has a Indian operation, but where can you give us some color about the international operations and how that's going?
I can. This is our do-over. In the 90s, we had made it to 27 countries with a global strategy in a desktop world with PCs. And every one of those locations had a different technology stack. Many times we bought our way into the country. There was no alignment, no synergy, no brand halo. And by the time the early 2000s came, we were in 3. We had divested, shut down, or had been outcompeted. And we learned that. We're a humble company. We took the lessons, we codified it, and we said, if we go global again, we need to remember these lessons. Well, fast forward about 6, 7 years, and the cloud starts to take on. And we realize that our apps are 70% globally, universally the same, and then 30% are different. The US is GAAP and non-GAAP. Other countries have different approaches to how they do their general ledgers and their ways of reporting finances. And so we ultimately said, okay, how do we actually get a global platform out and then have local engineers or local accountants in those countries help us localize the last 30%? And we began to treat it like any other startup. We had to prove product market fit in the country. In other words, our product was solving the problem in the UK better than any other alternative in the UK. Once we saw that, then we began to invest in go-to-market and then in brand marketing and then scale. We are now in about 7 or 8 countries, and we are doing in every single country, we have moved into the #1 position. There are a couple of countries where we're still early stage of proving product market fit, but the ones that we've gotten to scale, we've moved into the #1 position. And India, which we called out, is our largest R&D center. We have over 1,200 engineers in India, and they've led us into mobile. They've ensured that we were a global cloud company, and they are absolutely amazing. They do great work for us.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And how many times have you been to India?
Oh, goodness gracious. 3 dozen, maybe. I've lost track. In fact, yesterday, I still, as a part of being executive chair, I have responsibilities that include teaching in our learning and development programs, our vice presidents, directors, and others. And I'm teaching right now a group of vice presidents, and yesterday was the global team. And so it was 5:00 a.m. my time, so it was normal time for them. And it was so fun to see them because they were reminding me of my last trip to India in my goodbye tour, where they made me moonwalk across the stage, and then they actually filmed it and put it up on YouTube. So it was a nice trip down memory lane.
Well, you must have had some really wild experiences traveling, particularly in India. I've been to India myself quite a few times, but I'm sure your experiences were, well, at a different level. But I went there as a journalist. I interviewed quite a few people and hit all the outsourcing companies and a lot of the new tech startups coming out of India, which is booming today. And they say, well, it's going to surpass China. I was early in on the China thing, but early in on India as well. But maybe I'm early on West Virginia. I don't know, but we'll see. But I mean, can you just share one experience of traveling? Something anecdotal from your experiences traveling maybe in India or somewhere in Asia?
Oh yes, stories in so many corners of the country. And I had the chance to listen to John's interview last week, John Chambers, with you.
Yeah,
And I share his passion for what Prime Minister Modi is doing and how
sure.
how John's been helping there. I'll talk about this experimentation culture where everyone in the company is trained on the design thinking principles that you and I walked through a few minutes ago.
Right.
And when I fly out to the countries, or when I did as CEO, I would go visit each of the different groups, and I would look over their shoulder to see what they were working on. And we give all of our employees in Intuit 10% unstructured time. And this 10% is modeled after Google's 20% and 3M's and others who've done that over the years. And they're allowed to basically go into their supervisor and say, I have an idea, a problem to be solved. Here's a hypothesis. And they get, okay, you can take 10% of your time, find it, and go run experiments and come back and show us if the experiment worked or not. If it did, then we're going to submit it to Brad. And I used to keep a kitty, a VC fund, if you will. And I would fund any winning experiments for 90 days, and they had to prove the next tranche. So when I got to India, there was a team of people that showed me they had identified a problem. The problem is many Indian families grow crops for themselves. And then if they have a surplus, they go to the local mandi, which is like a farmer's market, and they try to sell the extra to make some money for their family. But what happens is when you go to these farmers markets, there are these middlemen at the mandis, and they would basically negotiate to figure out what they were willing to pay. Now, what we discovered, and we had no idea, these were the Indian engineers helping me learn this, is these Mondays, they operated as a consortium, and they would put a towel over their hands and they would tap their fingers to decide what prices they were going to pay. And some of that was actually designed based upon how hot the sun was. And they knew that they could charge or give less to the farmer, and the farmer's only alternative was if they wanted a higher price, they were going to have to pull that wagon physically another mile and a half in the hot sun, and their produce would start to wilt. And by the time they made it to the next Monday, it would be worth less. So these farmers were getting cheated, quite frankly. So our team came up with a solution. It was a mobile app where they could get it to all the farmers in a regular flip phone back in the day. And they could start to text each other and say, here's the one paying the most fair prices. And it would literally go out like crowdsourcing, and people would come to those Mondays, and the ones who were cheating were getting no business. And the next thing you know, the average price of the farmer's produce, they started to get a 16% price increase. And I was so thrilled. I visited a family to say, can you tell me what this experience was like? And Rebecca, the mother of the family, looked me in the eyes. I'm going to get a little emotional again. And her eyes teared up, and she said, because of this app, we can now send our girls to school just like we can our boys.
Wow.
Now, we couldn't find a way to bring that to market. We're a fintech company. So we donated that company to another organization that does agricultural products. We gave it to them for free, with the only condition is please bring this to market. And they've now continued to work in doing that. So that was a wonderful story from India that's about changing people's lives. And it was 10% unstructured time where our employees knew how to apply design thinking to do something that we wouldn't have done. I wouldn't have made that decision, but I'm glad somebody did.
Oh, well, that's a great story. I'm sure some people on the screen who are listening in here are have some ideas for you.
I'm sure
And we're going to get to those questions in a minute, but I just want to share one more screen about Brad, and really give him his due here on all of the wonderful things that he's doing. Okay.
Mr. Rogers.
So here we go. Hope everyone can see this. These are all of the various aspects of programs that Brad and his wife Elise are bringing to West Virginia, Marshall University, and working on the new incubator, which I saw in Huntington, infusing design thinking in the curriculum, the new the Brad Smith School of Business and Innovation at Marshall University, the scholarships, the remote worker program, which is going to be launched soon, which is going to be really interesting and could have some meaning for people who are listening in here, because it can apply to anyone. You don't have to be in West Virginia. You can be a remote worker and come in. And also how you're partnering with John Chambers and Ray Lane, who have been on our program before, to help to reposition West Virginia as a startup state, and working together on the Rockefeller Neuroscience Institute. So altogether, what, 60 million, Brad, in the Mountain State, which I put here, almost heaven.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you calling those things out. A lot of people work together to make these things happen, and it's a privilege just to be a part of that team. Well,
good. Congratulations to you for all this. I would like to also get some questions coming in here, and I got to put my glasses on so I can see all these. Look at all these questions that have come in. Okay. Oh, okay. Here's a TurboTax customer.
Okay.
I have a very complicated. Could I look forward to TurboTax supporting international tax forms? Oh boy.
You know what? I'll say this. We have incredibly talented people who are used to dealing with every variation of tax there is. And now we have TurboTax Live, which is a network of CPAs, tax attorneys, and registered tax professionals. And they can literally work with you in real time. They show up as a one-way video in your screen, your mobile phone, your tablet, or your PC. And they'll actually circle on your screen areas to go look for things, or they'll help you do the work, or they'll even do the whole return for you. So if it can get figured out, somebody in TurboTax can help.
Okay, there you go, Hal. There's your answer. Paul Simon has a question about what gaps do you see in the entrepreneurial ecosystem and how can we work to fill them? I think we discussed some of this, but is there anything you want to add to the list of things we discussed already, Brad?
Rebecca, I missed the first part of the question on the
Well, she's with Bright Energy Innovators, nonprofit energy tech incubator in Northeast Ohio, which I actually also visited recently on this road trip. I can't fly anymore, so I've been driving. But anyhow, she says, what gaps do you see in the entrepreneurial ecosystem and how can we work to fill them?
Yes. Yeah, I think we did touch on some of this, but ultimately what I believe is important is that we infuse in entrepreneurs the Silicon Valley techniques of design thinking, because venture capitalists don't buy business plans. They buy people and they buy in-market evidence. In fact, there's a book in the Silicon Valley called Getting to Plan B, written by Randy Komisar. The premise of the entire book is that 90% of all the successes in the Silicon Valley failed on their first idea. In fact, many failed the second, third, and fourth idea. That's called pivoting. And that's where you actually say, okay, I'm still in love with the vision, but this avenue didn't work. I'm going to think about another approach. And the point is, in venture capitalists, it's all about investing in something that has less risk, but big upside. And the way you do that is you have a passionate entrepreneur who knows how to run rigorous in-market experiments and can come back with evidence and say, let me show you what real customer data suggests or what the real feedback from customers is. And then the money follows. So I'm about starting at that seed corn, which is teaching the techniques, inspiring individuals to dream big, to ask why not instead of why, and then know that VC money and everything else is going to come. So we're working on building that ecosystem out through the education system, through mentorship, through competitions where we can actually help coach people and then get VCs and others to come in. And you can be a part of that. We love Ohio, Kentucky, Ohio, West Virginia. You know, we're the tri-state area. My wife's from Ohio, so big fans.
Good, good. All right. Scott Shane from Comeback Capital has a question about what disadvantage do you think that West Virginia has or any other Heartland located startup has over any other one that might be in Silicon Valley? And how can the Heartland startups overcome any disadvantage that they have? That's a big picture question, but I like the question. Thank you, Scott, for the question.
I love the question. And it was Scott who asked that question?
Yeah, Scott Shane from Comeback Capital.
Scott, thank you. You know, I'm going to say to you, I think it is mindset. It is having a mindset of zero sum. Someone has to lose for us to win, or it's not possible because I'm not sitting in XYZ state, or no one's ever going to fund me even if I come up with a great idea. I think we have to begin to dream of the art of the possible. We have to be willing to take risks. We have to be willing to actually get out there and show people that we know how to build things. And then once one success happens, another success will happen and things go on. So it's having a growth mindset and not a fixed mindset. And by the way, this is not a pejorative statement. This is about a reality that most places I travel, other than in the Valley and a couple other places where they think everything is possible, we just have to overcome that. So I would just say, lean into the win. That's what we have to do. The Heartland has to do that. It has to believe in itself.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, I like that phrase, and I believe in it. Okay, we've got a compliment. You are both awesome. Wow, thank you.
I would definitely say you are awesome, Rebecca, and you're shining some halo on me, and I'm trying not to mess it up.
Oh, no, you're doing a great job. We have a question from Hong Kong. Okay, let's see, Lawrence, thank you for your question. It's very entrepreneurial, taking risk, and why not spirit? Do you see Asia picking this up fast enough, since it is not part of the culture of people and in business? And is Asia picking up design thinking to come up with really creative products? So I think that's the gist of the question. Is Asia picking up design thinking to come up with really creative products? And thank you, Lawrence, for the question.
Yes, Lawrence, thank you so much. And the answer is absolutely. I'll share the consensus thinking in the Valley right now, especially in fintech and in payments. It was a decade ago when we would travel to parts of Asia and we would see what was happening in the Valley being replicated quickly. When I now go to Asia and especially in parts like China, I'm trying to figure out what we need to catch up on.
Okay.
They are now leading in so many ways. Now, that does not mean that we're losing. It means we need to be inspired and continue to lean in and think about other ways to approach problems. So I think the answer is yes. Asia is applying design thinking. Asia is starting to create some real successes. I think the United States and other parts of the world have exactly the same ability and capability. We just have to really lean in and make sure that we're thinking about how to leapfrog and not just to increment our way to the next version of something.
Okay. So you've been thinking a lot about China lately as well?
I have, not as a company at Intuit. We have gone multiple times there, and our choices are based upon just the way they think about fintech and data and banking. And we've seen some of that play out with Ant Financial and the others. And we respect the laws of every country, and we respect their cultures and their willingness and desires to do things the way they want to do it. And we don't believe we can impose that on somebody in terms of our business model. So we've made choices not to go into China today. Over time, we may. But me, as someone who wants to continue to learn and to grow and to be available to see everything that's happening around us, you can't not look at China.
Right.
China has really stepped up their game in a lot of ways. Now, they have a different set of rules that we may or may not agree with, or I may not agree with, but it is producing results that cannot be ignored. And we have to recognize that that's what's happening instead of trying to talk it down. There's an old quote that I love. I think it was Yogi Berra, that said, you don't blow out somebody else's candle to make your own glow brighter. Their candle's glowing bright, and we're going to have to figure out how to get ours glowing brighter, and that's the name of the game, and that's why I continue to study China.
Yeah, and they really have made a lot of strides in fintech innovation.
Yes, they have.
Yeah, so all right, Joel Reed has a question. Why is it so hard to have effective vocational tech schools in the US? Do we lack the right industry incentives?
I'm not sure it's an industry incentive challenge as we talk about these unfilled positions with electricians and skilled tool and die makers or truck drivers. I honestly think that through a combination of good intent and bad execution and bad policy, we got ourselves into this four-year college or bust mindset. And I honestly think it's been atrocious. If you look at the stats, I'm going to get these roughly right. The last time I looked, roughly 51% of college students complete a four-year degree in 6 years. 49% get labeled the rest of their lives a college dropout. Yet they leave with student loan debt. And we have $1.5 trillion of student loan debt in the United States. And then you start to say, okay, these individuals who got some college done, they got no credit for it. It's not like they got micro certifications and they came out and now they are an apprentice to something. And then you also go back to the high school VOTEC. There was a period of time where it did look like it was channeled more towards a certain group of people and it was creating haves and have-nots. And so with good intent, people decided, hey, we're not going to do that. We're going to give everybody a chance. And unfortunately, we eliminated a lot of VOTEC. And there are a lot of people who may not want to go to college. And so I think we've got to come back to first respecting and appreciating that these jobs add real value and they are critical. And quite frankly, they create a class of society that's starting to get smaller and smaller in our country, which is a vibrant middle class. The other thing I'll say is I'm not a fan of STEM. I'm a fan of STEAM, adding the A's back in, which are the arts. Because if you look at the best technology, it's the complexity of technology that's been designed away like an iPhone. So it's so intuitive that my mother can use it and she's in her 80s. There is a role for artists, and we have got to appreciate that and bring them into this next generation as well, or we're going to struggle. So I'm sorry to be so passionate about it, but I am a believer. And I think we have to get VOTEC back, but leaning into the next generation of what VOTEC can be. Robotics, automation, design, those things.
Right. Yeah. So thinking about the A in STEM, I'm thinking about Steve Jobs and how he really did have the A, right?
Yes, and I'm going to pull something out here if you don't mind. This
Go ahead.
book, if I can hold it up and you may be able to see it.
Yeah.
It's The Art of Making Money, Doing What You Love. This has been created through the 10% unstructured time by Intuit designers for the Wing to Wing Foundation, and it's designed for middle school and high school kids, and it tells them what the average salary is for someone who does audio or someone who does visual design, and then actually has an accompanying package for their high school counselor to help them figure out how to pursue this in a design school or a VOTEC school.
Wow.
And it puts the A back in STEM.
Oh, that's excellent. All right. So Dean Reyes has a question.
Hi, Dean Reyes.
What are the greatest opportunities we need to go after? What are those for the world, US, and for states like West Virginia? On the same note, what are the greatest risks looming on the horizon? Leave it to Dean Reyes to ask this huge question.
Well, Dean Reyes is an amazing leader. He's a great friend. He's an inspiration to me. I love spending time with him. I love learning from him and, quite frankly, partnering with him.
Yeah.
I'll start first with the biggest opportunity is entrepreneurism. If you look
Right.
at the stats, 75% of young men and women graduating from school as we speak don't want to work for another company. They want to start their own company. 75% of all jobs created around the world, net new jobs, are created in startups. But 75% of the venture capital in the United States the last several years went to 3 states, California, New York, and Massachusetts. We've got to infuse entrepreneurial and design thinking into all of our curriculum across all of the globe and get everybody leaning into creating and doing again, whether it's VOTEC or it's college. Now, where do they put that energy? I'm a big believer that we're in this massive sort of transformation into the digital economy. I think there are 4 disruptive technologies that are catalysts for the future. There's 1 foundational set of skills that are going to be required for those 4 to succeed. And then there's a couple of consumer facing. So if you don't mind, I'll unpack those. Does that work?
Go ahead. Go for it.
So the 4 disruptive, the first is artificial intelligence. But I'm going to quote Satya Nadella, my friend at Microsoft, who says, artificial intelligence is written in PowerPoint, machine learning is written in Python. Said another way, AI becomes one of those overloaded words. So when I say artificial intelligence is the first thing, it's got a couple of components. It's machine learning, knowledge engineering, and natural language processing. The second disruptive technology after AI is biotechnology in all of its forms. Pharmaceuticals, environmental, agriculture. The third is the Internet of Things and edge computing. And the fourth is 5G. So those are the 4 that I think are really the forefront and the catalyst for the next chapter. For those to be successful, there's a foundational set of skills, which I will just call cybersecurity, but includes data and privacy and data stewardship principles. Where do you give permission and get permission to use data? But that's a really important set of skills and technologies. And then that takes me to the consumer facing side. And this is where I'm a big believer, where technology meets human behavior and expertise is where the next big plateau is. And there are 2 pieces in there. The first is digitization of services. And this is where you can have your doctor working with a patient through telemedicine, a teacher with a student through distance learning, a tax expert with a tax filer through TurboTax Live. It's virtual collaboration. And the second is e-commerce, the digitization of commerce. And this is buy online, pick up in store. It's contactless payments. It's all the fintech products. So those are the big opportunities. The risks, I think the risk is not leaning into the digital economy. And this is where I want to be really cautious, because I just talked about this with STEAM. You don't have to be an engineer to be a part of the digital economy, but I will say this, there isn't going to be a company that isn't in some way, shape, or form a technology company. Retailers now have to be able to sell online. Doctors have to be able to figure out how to get their records electronically transferred. So just think about how you can bring your skills to coexist with technology, and don't resist it, embrace it.
Right. Well, that's, and in some cases, I think we have this age issue where, people maybe over 70 don't get it as quickly as those who are in their 20s or 30s. But yeah, anyhow, just a comment.
Well, let me add to that comment. Intuit has had 6 CEOs. I was the 5th. My successor is the 6th. none of the 6 CEOs were computer scientists and engineers.
Oh, it's good.
I've never written a line of code in my life. But what I found out was all engineers want me to do is to set the grand challenge and create the space where they can do the best work of their lives. So all of us have a part to play in the technology sector, whether we're engineers or not.
Right. Yeah, so that just reminds me where Jack Ma said, Alibaba said, he doesn't know anything about computers, he never, but, it's one of the biggest computer digital companies in the world and
Yeah.
very innovative. All right, so Joel Reed, hi Joel from Pittsburgh. Some leading high-tech areas have lost their character and are subject to the world of worst of gentrification, unaffordable housing, high price of living, lost connections to neighbors. Pittsburgh is one of the world's top robotics communities. Yes, Carnegie Mellon, right? But it's been a well-kept secret. I don't think it's so secret, but anyhow, maybe it looks like that from the inside. We're working to change that, but we don't want to lose what we have here in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. And Brad, I was going to bring up that some people said you're kind of like the Mr. Rogers of the tech community. But anyhow, how would a community like Pittsburgh or Huntington strike a balance between our ambitions and our sense of community and equality? Good question, because the culture can change.
Yes. Well, Joel, first of all, thank you. And I celebrate the success of Pittsburgh. And we've actually studied it in West Virginia. But I'll start first with, I agree with you. There are some parts of the world, including the Silicon Valley, that are at the risk of losing what they have. And I think there's 3 things contributing to that right now. One is overprice, whether it's real estate and affordable housing or it's overpriced talent. The second's overregulated. It's become really hard to start up a business here, and in some cases operate a business. And potential risk of overconfidence, not reacting to the current things that we're seeing happen around us as people are leaving the state. So I think the Silicon Valley still has a lot of game left, but we're going to have to come to terms with those, which leads me to the fact that our students in Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon and West Virginia University and Marshall University come out with the same skills, the same talent, the same passion. But historically, we used to convince ourselves we had to leave our communities and go to the coast. We don't have to do that anymore. And what we believe we can do and still preserve our culture is, for example, in West Virginia, we've launched the Outdoor Economic Development Collaborative and the Remote Worker Program. And this is where we're inviting people who are gainfully employed in these other companies to move to our state, live where they can work and play, get access to the best whitewater rapids, get access to the best biking trails, mountain climbing, get access to the nicest, kindest people you'll ever meet. Pittsburgh, down into West Virginia, over in Ohio, into Kentucky. Amazing, salt of the earth, community-oriented people. And you can live an incredible lifestyle and be a part of this next chapter. And I think for me, to answer your question about how do we not lose it, how do we not lose who we are, I'm going to do a little story for you. When I go see my mom, she still lives in the same house in Canova. I knock on the door. Every single time she opens the door, she tears up and I tear up. And the first thing she says to me is, "Honey, your G.I. Joes are back in the bedroom in your toy chest if you want them." And I say, "Mom, I'm a grown man. I have 2 daughters who graduated from college and law school. I haven't played with my G.I. Joes for years." And she says, "I know, honey, but I remember how happy they made you, so I kept them just in case." When she looks in my eyes, she doesn't see gray hair and wrinkles. She sees the same baby she gave birth to all those years ago. And that reminds me, we can become another version of who we are. We can become adults without losing our soul. And that's what I think Pittsburgh has done so well. When we were trying to convince West Virginia that we could reimagine ourselves, we studied Ireland. We studied Pittsburgh, we studied Detroit, we studied Israel and France, because we see ourselves in you, but you've created a whole new version of yourself, and we can too. So believe me, Pittsburgh is special. You're not the best kept secret in the world. People are studying you, but you're going to start getting a lot of people moving your way.
Yeah, I spent some time in Pittsburgh too on my recent road trip. Couple of times through Pittsburgh, seeing what's going on there. And so okay, Sam, I'm getting to your question. My company Axel AI, and its AI company, develops a platform that helps marketing teams manage and search video. Do you think video will keep growing as a means of communication for corporate and other teams? Well, that seems kind of a planted question, but go ahead, Brad.
You know what, planted or not, I think it's an incredibly insightful question. The answer is unequivocally yes. When you think
Okay.
about video, video gives you that experiential feeling of seeing something in action and
Yeah.
hearing a story. And everyone understands you can win minds one to many, sharing facts and logic, but that doesn't change behavior. What changes behavior is winning the heart. And that is what video does. Video is the best medium for doing that, and it is
Yeah.
incredibly effective. So I am absolutely a believer video is a
Yeah.
game changer.
Oh, yeah, that's a great answer. Okay. There's a question here about the pandemic. They want to know just about Nordstrom, but why don't we just make it for Intuit and your Wing to Wing Foundation? How's the pandemic, changing the way you're doing business today?
Well, I think one thing we all know about market disruptions is they accelerate secular trends that were already underway by 3 to 5 years. And so Nordstrom had already embraced digital assets, omni-channel commerce, so selling online and offline. They'd even embraced store fulfillment, which is if a fulfillment center is down, how do we actually fulfill your order out of your local Nordstrom and then send it to your home? And then COVID came and it required all those things and more, because COVID was the greatest experiment of design thinking. A lot of people went out with a hypothesis that said, here's how I'm going to navigate this downturn. And then something else happened and they had to pivot and come up with a new way. And Nordstrom has had to do that, as has Intuit and every other company around the globe. I'm a part of the Business Council, which is the 150 S&P 500 companies. CEOs get together. We usually meet 3 times a year. We've met 22 times since COVID.
Oh,
And we share best practices, lessons learned. What are you doing? What can I learn from you? And it's been literally a team sport. And so I would say there's 3 big lessons that have come out of COVID for all these companies collectively. The first is the importance of empathy. Put yourself in the shoes of your customer and the shoes of your employees, and remember, it's lives before livelihoods. So it is about being caring, starting every one-on-one with how are you doing before you get to the project. The second is edit. So after empathy is edit. When you're working from remote locations and you've got your dog barking, your cat coming in, your kid needing to be fed, distance learning, you can't deal with 1,000 things. So leaders have to edit down to the critical few, 6 or fewer. And then the last is adapt. And I would encourage everybody to not think about reopen, think about reimagine and reinvent. Okay. And the way you do that is by sitting down now and saying, what are the things that have actually worked better than we would have ever thought before COVID? Wow, we can actually teach online. I can even do my doctor's appointment online, and then make that the new way of doing things when you come out a different version of yourself. And those are the 3 big lessons: empathize, edit, and adapt.
wow. So many great lessons here today. Matt and Laurie from Hong Kong has a question. What is the role that non-engineers, like finance people, can play in venture building?
Removing the friction so that those that build products can move with the velocity of life. So I always challenge all of our team members that we're servant leaders and we have to serve the customer, and the customer has a time clock. It's not our time clock, and there are competitors moving faster than us. So I ask our finance team, what are the leading indicators and metrics our teams need so they can measure whether or not their idea is working? What are the contracts that we used to require people to send it to us to approve? How do we delegate and empower those people and maybe give them guardrails? You're allowed to say yes between this and this. Anything you can do to speed up decision-making and velocity and to remove friction from the system so people can actually ship code faster is the best thing you can do to be a part of this next chapter.
Very good. Are you actively looking for new fintech ideas to invest in or acquire?
Absolutely. I am the world's greatest champion of new ideas and always looking for new ideas. And if it's not something that fits me, I'm always willing to try to channel that to somebody who may have interest.
All right. Well, good. Look, let me share the screen here again and move right along. Thank you, everyone, for your great questions. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to launch our poll here while we're still online. And okay, there's a couple questions here. I'm launching the polling right now. And so just, this is anonymous, so don't worry about whatever your answer is. And these are really kind of just fun questions. Have you had your COVID vaccination yet? If not, when do you expect to receive it? And maybe you should go to West Virginia to get it. Since they seem to be leading the pack in getting distribution. Have you ever been to West Virginia? Okay. Where do you live? Okay. Come on, folks, weigh in from India. Have you ever used an Intuit product? QuickBooks, TurboTax? A lot of people have. Do you want to attend? Okay, this is a little bit promotional, but do you want to attend our networking session next Thursday, 4 p.m.? Oh, a lot of people do. Okay, that's good. So next week, we actually are going to have a Zoom meeting where we can all see one another online. And there's basically a requirement that you have to come online and share something that you're working on. You know, what project you're working on. And so you have to contribute. If you come on, you're not just going to listen, you're going to contribute. So I am going to, let's see what we got here. Very few people have gotten the vaccination. About a third think by the end of March, half by the end of June, 2% never. Have they ever been to West Virginia? 2/3 say yes. Where do you live? 1/4 in Silicon Valley, 1/4 in New York, 5% in Hong Kong, a lot in West Virginia. Have you ever used an Intuit product? Wow, you're going to be happy with this, Brad. 84%.
Wow, thank you for that.
Okay. Do you want to attend our networking session next Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific time? Yes. All right. Well, thank you. So I'm going to just share. I'm going to end the polling now, but thank you everyone for participating. And I'll just share the results with everyone. And all right. So if you would like to participate in our networking session next week, we're going to have a poll, we're going to have a quiz, and we're going to have prizes, and we're going to have interaction. Most of all, it's going to be interaction. This is a photo of us last January, which seems like years ago. I think it was this time last year, exact same date, where we had this wonderful VIP dinner in San Francisco restaurant, and everybody shared what they were working on. So we're going to do the same thing online. And if you want to sign up, you can go to silicon-circle.eventbrite and sign on. And if you're a member, it's absolutely free. If you're not a member, then you have to ask me for the code, and then you'll be able to sign on as well. So thank you everyone for listening in. Thank you Invest Hong Kong. Thank you Lawrence Hang for always being with us. And everyone go to Hong Kong and join the Silicon Dragon Circle and go to West Virginia as well. So good. Thank you, Brad, for being with us today. I really learned a lot. It's good that we have a recording of this session because I would never be able to keep up with everything you said. But we are going to be sharing it out on our blog and also our video on YouTube. So we do have a YouTube channel. We have our website, we have our mobile app, and so just stay tuned with all those things, and so you can get all these words of wisdom from Brad. Okay, any final comments, Brad, before we do our toast?
You know, Rebecca, I want to first just say it's a privilege to spend time with you, and I am humbled by what you do for others and how you bring us all together. And second, I want to thank all of you who dialed in today and was able to ask questions. It really, really means the world to me. And last but not least is, I do hope that when we officially launch, if anyone is interested in learning more about the amazing things going on in West Virginia, please take the time to learn about it, because we are trying to create a model that others can either learn from or be a part of. And believe me, we've learned from all of you, and so hopefully we can give it back in return. So thank you so much.
Oh yeah, and yes, please stay tuned with us for the more news about the remote worker program.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you very much, Brad.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye now, everyone. See you next Thursday. Bye-bye.